The night is never silent. Shadows move where no one is watching. I have a few chilling tales that will creep into your mind and help you relax too. If you truly dare to listen, if you find our stories calming or even a little helpful, make sure to subscribe and like this video. And tell us, what time and from which part of the world are you listening? Stay with me, if you dare, and let the night whisper its secrets. Our first story tonight. Let's begin. I am an urban explorer searching for structures that don't make sense. As you've probably gleaned from the title of this post, I am an urban explorer. My speciality is finding and investigating structures that, for lack of any better description, just don't make sense. Sometimes it's something small, like a house that's slightly wider on the inside than the outside. That's quite common and often goes unnoticed. Maybe a door gets minutely wider as you open it, then returns to its original dimensions when it gets closed. Then there's the big stuff, the stuff I'm actually interested in. Rooms that shouldn't exist, impossibly high ceilings, that sort of thing. I don't normally post anything here. I tend to just read all your spooky stories and personal experiences, which make me feel like my experiences aren't that unusual to be having, as bizarre as that sounds. I wanted my first post here to be a document of all the weird encounters I've had with strange places over the years. This post will still be that, but if I'm going to talk about all that, I also need to go into the events of the last month, which ultimately led to all my friends taking a step back from urban exploration altogether. So a bit of background. I live in the UK, in Manchester. Like all cities, it has nice parts and not so nice parts. As much as I love the city, sometimes it feels like there isn't much to do. At least nothing that interests us, so every few weeks, me and my group of 4 friends hop on a train and go somewhere else. We pack bags full of camping equipment, torches, high-vis vests, plenty of rope, and anything else we think we might need. We scope out a spot, which normally involves checking social media for people talking about how they had an unusual experience near an abandoned building after dark, or how a family pet disappeared near a decommissioned train tunnel. Stuff like that. Once we have a spot that's likely to be the kind of thing we're after, we figure out what we might need, what we are likely to encounter, etc. Most explorations are fairly routine. We stay the night nearby, watching the area to see if there are any guards or squatters. 9 times out of 10 there aren't. Then we make our entry. Typically we open the door or poke our heads in through a window first, just to see what we're dealing with. You never know when you're going to walk through the front door without a care in the world and fall down a bottomless pit. No, that hasn't happened yet. It very nearly happened to one of the guys last year, but we've been very cautious since then. Some of my favorite places include I loved the possibly endless train tunnel. It was a lot of fun. I won't say where it is. I don't want a bunch of people to go there and ruin the spot with graffiti and rubbish and syringes and the like. Actually, I just looked it up and apparently the police walled up both ends and sealed the tunnel a few months ago. A shame. Definitely my favorite place to visit. I hope no one ended up cluelessly wandering in. I was in there with another guy and I remember very vividly the moment when we crossed over into the twilight zone, as my mate put it. He wasn't far off. When we were walking, we could feel the air gently moving through the tunnel. Even though we couldn't see the other end in the darkness, we knew there was an opening that air was blowing through. There was the occasional scatter of a squirrel or rat or something which freaked us out every time it happened, sending the pair of us into a brief laughing fit over how much we had jumped. And then, after walking for about 5 minutes, the subtle breeze stopped. When it happened, we both instantly realized and stood motionless. It was like both ends of the tunnel had closed. There were no more rats or squirrels, just the pair of us, alone in the quiet darkness. Naturally, we were grinning like giddy kids. My torch didn't work, nor did my mate's. We tried tugging the rope secured around our waist to let our friends at the tunnel's entrance know that we were past the threshold. But they couldn't feel any tension in the rope from their end. We kept on walking. This tunnel wasn't very long, but you couldn't see the daylight at the end because the tunnel actually had a slight curve in it. In the past, before the anomaly formed, you'd walk through the tunnel and in 2 minutes you would be out the other side. We walked for 20, the slight curve in the tunnel leading us round in a wide arch until we reckoned we were actually facing back the way we came. We stood there theorizing how far the tunnel carried on, curving around, debating whether to go further. We eventually decided not to. I didn't fancy walking for hours just to end up finding a dead end or something. When we reached the opening we had come from, the sounds of the world returned. Such an eerie feeling, being outside time and space. That's absolutely not a proven theory, by the way, that's just what I'm going with. It's like once you step past the threshold, the world outside stops existing. Or maybe it's you that stops existing for a moment. These strange places always smell the same. It's always the same persistent metallic odor. Sometimes it gets so intense that your eyes start to burn. Sometimes it can help you to find a threshold. There was one house we went to a couple years ago. One of my friends knew someone who said their house suddenly had an extra floor. That was extremely exciting. It's not every day you get to pinpoint the exact day that a building changed. Most of the time, we got to a place to find that the building had been that way for a while. But this one was fresh. Houses are particularly odd to visit. Sometimes it's just an extra room, so we have to wander through the entire house until we find a room that smells like metal, often with weird pictures on the walls and no windows. This house was different. A whole new floor had seemingly grown overnight. And the best part? It wasn't just one new floor. After exploring the house for probably a good 2 hours, our watches stopped working. We counted 16 additional floors in this 2-story house. The only reason we stopped climbing the endless staircases was because our buddies outside ran out of rope. That's another thing. We never go into a property without a length of rope tied around us, fed back to 2 guys standing outside, mainly so the guys inside can find their way out. We typically carry a few 60 and 70 meter lengths of mountaineering rope each, giving us about 500 meters when tied end to end. At one point, we carried closer to 700 or 800 meters, but at that point it got tough to transport. We all wake up in cold sweats from nightmares where we found ourselves lost in an abandoned building with no windows or doors, breathlessly diving down endless hallways, crying out for anyone to find them. Not pleasant. I remember the place we went to that first made the rope a necessary precaution. There was a small patch of woodland somewhere on the west coast of Wales near a residential area. Again, no specifics. Not because I don't want to ruin the spot. This time, I straight up don't want people flocking there and getting themselves killed. We saw on social media, mainly Reddit, thanks, that a couple people's pets had gone missing around there. They thought a predatory animal might be in the woods, so they sent animal control to do a sweep, which didn't take long since it's an area of about 50 trees. It came up clean. That's what got our interest peaked. We showed up and started doing some surveillance. We had a theory that the anomaly was only manifesting during the night, which we had seen once or twice before at other locations. Probably something to do with the decreased visibility. We were right. We went in after dark, and suddenly the wooded area of 50 trees turned into a dense forest seeming to go on for miles. Me and a buddy walked for 30 minutes before we stopped and headed back. Even with the rope tied around our waists, leading back to our friends at the edge of the woods, we still got lost. It was dark enough that we could barely see our ropes. We ended up circling around trees in each other's lines. We couldn't call out to the others either, since sound works differently once you're past the threshold. That means we couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear us. After a while of awkwardly stumbling around in the dark, single file with my hand on his shoulder, pulling our ropes constantly to keep the tension, we made it out. That was the most frightened I have ever been when exploring a place. We don't do forests anymore. Some guy one of my friends used to hang out with always wanted to find out what caused the anomalies to form. We tended not to tell anyone about the anomalies since the news and the police always cover up any instances, and we didn't want our friends or family getting taken in the night by G-men. That being said, some people came to know about them, this guy being one. He had a theory that a power plant he lived near was actually a secret underground hadron collider. That sounded awesome, so of course we checked it out. It turned out that the power plant was one of these strange places. We managed to dodge to surprisingly lax security and got in through a window, to find that the geometry inside made absolutely no sense. There was no ceiling, first of all, just walls and doors that extended upwards into the darkness. A lot of rooms were either too big or far too small to make sense, and plenty of them were in weird places relative to the building's dimensions. By far the weirdest part was that this power plant was still in use. Workers still went in through the front door and came out hours later like regular plant workers, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the interior of their building looked like something fresh out of Stephen King's nightmares. I started believing that guy after seeing all that. I don't know about the Hadron Collider theory, but that building definitely has something to do with something. In terms of which of us came the closest to finding out why these weird structures exist and how they keep forming, I reckon he got the closest. And then, last month, my mate and I went to check on him at his house. Apparently, he hadn't been responding to texts or calls, which was strange since he never just dropped off the grid like that. Even if he was going on holiday or something, he would let someone know. When we got to his front door, it was slightly ajar. We got worried at that point, so we pushed it open. Inside was a vast expanse of darkness. No walls, no ceiling. Just a flat floor extending inwards until the light from the outdoors dissipated far into the distance. A couple days later, we went in with our equipment and ropes. The area was far wider than the house's floor plan. I think we ended up walking the length of a football field, if not more. I was in his house a couple months before this. Now he was gone, along with all his possessions. His ugly carpet, his old armchair, his goldfish, everything. Every trace of him gone. We optimistically thought that he might have come home from work to find his home like that and tried walking in. We thought that if we walked far enough and called out his name loud enough that he might find his way back. We didn't want to grapple with the possibility that the anomaly formed while he was still inside, and that he just blinked out of existence along with his possessions. The police taped up the doors and boarded the windows, and a week later his house was knocked down, The anomaly was gone. Believe me, we tried to get back through the threshold, but it was gone. We stopped trying to find out the cause of the strange places after that. We just dropped our theories and left it alone. We don't go near the power plant. We don't even talk about it. This is the first time I'm mentioning it. My friends moved on from urban exploration for a while. They stepped up on their families and stable jobs, and they wouldn't risk any of it to explore another strange house or abandoned warehouse. That lasted all of a month. We still go out to abandoned buildings and train tunnels as if in defiance of our fears. Yes, we have fears. Fears that we will wake up one day in a black void that was once our home. But for now, none of us are going to stop doing what we love. We just can't leave it alone. I actually tried to walk away from it all, but it's just too exhilarating. I get too much of a buzz from stepping past a threshold, that feeling of time standing still. Sounds of the outside world being replaced with stone silence like hands clasped over my ears. I live for that feeling, knowing that to the rest of the world, for that brief moment, I simply don't exist. Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. Then the rangers warned me not to look at the man in my peripheral vision. I'm a photographer, so I tried to take his picture instead. I'm a wildlife photographer. It's a career built on patience, stillness, and the ability to become just another silent, uninteresting part of the landscape. I've spent weeks at a time utterly alone in the vast, remote corners of national forests. My only companions were the whispers of the wind and the patient clicking of my camera's shutter. I've waited 14 hours in a cramped blind, motionless, just for a 3-second glimpse of a reclusive pine marten. That's how I thrive on that solitude and how I love the deep, profound quiet of the wild. I always thought it's where I feel most myself, at least it used to be. Now the silence is the most terrifying thing I know because it's never truly silent. And the solitude is a lie because I am never ever truly alone. This all started 3 months ago. I was on a long-term project in a massive, sparsely populated national forest. It's a primeval sort of place full of ancient Douglas firs that tower like cathedral spires, their tops lost in a perpetual mist. My goal was to capture a portfolio of the elusive Cascade red fox, a beautiful but notoriously shy creature. For the first few weeks, it was business as usual. I'd rise before dawn, hike miles into the backcountry, and set up, waiting for the forest to offer up its secrets. One evening, I got the shot I'd been dreaming of. A magnificent male fox, the color of its coat was of a dying fire, paused in a sun-dappled clearing, its head cocked, listening. The light was perfect, the composition was something else. I rattled off a dozen frames, my heart soaring with that pure electric thrill that only photographers know. Back at my base camp that night, I eagerly loaded the photos onto my laptop. I scrolled through and there it was, the money shot. The fox was perfectly in focus, its eyes were sharp and intelligent. The background was a beautiful soft bokeh of green and gold. It was perfect, except for the smudge. In the upper right-hand corner of the frame, there was a strange vertical blur of white light. It was out of focus, just an artifact, but it was annoying. It looked like a lens flare, but the sun was behind me. It made no sense. I checked the other frames. It was there in the exact same spot in every single one. A persistent ghostly slash against the otherwise perfect image. I sighed, chalking it up to some weird internal reflection in my lens, and made a mental note to clean all my gear thoroughly. A week later, I was photographing a herd of elk by a river at dawn. Again, a perfect morning. The mist was rising off the water. The great animals were silhouetted against the nascent light. It was a primordial, beautiful scene. I took hundreds of photos, and when I reviewed them later, the smudge was there. Different location, different time of day, different lens, but the same vertical, out-of-focus slash of white light, always in the upper periphery of the frame. Now I was more than annoyed. I was obsessed. I thought to myself that it was a consistent technical problem, a something I needed to solve. Was it a scratch on my camera's sensor? A flaw in the shutter mechanism? I spent 2 full days troubleshooting, running diagnostics, taking test shots of blank surfaces. I found nothing. My gear was, by all accounts, in perfect working order. The only way to solve it was to recreate the conditions. I went back to the clearing where I'd photographed the fox. I set up my camera on a tripod in the exact same spot at the exact same time of day. I framed the shot identically. And then I waited. My goal was to see the flare appear through the viewfinder before I took the picture. I sat there for hours, still as a stone, my eye pressed to the camera. The sun dappled the clearing. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The forest was quiet, but as the afternoon wore on, a new feeling began to creep in, a low-grade, primal hum of anxiety. It was the feeling of being watched. It's a sensation every creature in the wild knows. A prickling at the back of your neck, a sudden cold awareness that you are no longer just an observer, but are also the observed. I slowly, carefully scanned the tree line, my eyes searching for the glint of an eye, the twitch of an ear. I saw nothing, but the feeling grew stronger. It was coming from my side, from the very edge of my vision. I kept my head perfectly still, my breathing slow and even, but my eyes darted to the right. And I saw it for just a fraction of a second. It was a tall, wavering shape like a column of heat haze. It was the shape of a man, long and thin, and it was hanging upside down from a thick, high branch of a fir tree, its form indistinct and shimmering. The moment my brain registered the impossible image, I snapped my head to look directly at it. And there was nothing there. Just the tree branch, empty against the sky. The forest was still. The feeling of being watched was gone. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs, my mouth dry. I told myself I was overtired, that the solitude was getting to me. I was seeing things. It was a trick of the light, a figment of a sleep-deprived imagination. I packed up my gear, unnerved, and hiked back to my truck. I needed a break. I needed to see other people. I drove to the nearest ranger station, a rustic little cabin that served as the park's administrative hub. There were 2 rangers on duty, an older grizzled man with a kind, weary face and a younger woman. I made some small talk, bought a new map I didn't need, and then, trying to sound casual, I asked my question. "Hey, this is going to sound weird," I started, "but have you guys ever seen strange things out in the deep woods, like tricks of the light?" The older ranger looked up from his paperwork. He and the younger ranger exchanged a look. It was a brief, knowing glance, but it was enough. "What kind of tricks of the light are we talking about?" he asked, his voice a low, calm rumble. I felt like an idiot, but I pressed on. Like a shape, a tall, shimmering shape of a man hanging upside down from a tree. You only see it out of the corner of your eye. The younger ranger's friendly expression tightened. The older just sighed, a long, tired sound, and leaned back in his chair. "The upside-down man," he said. And it wasn't a question. "Yeah, we've seen him. Most of the folks who spend enough time out here have." A wave of cold relief, immediately followed by a wave of colder dread, washed over me. I wasn't crazy, but that meant the thing was real. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't know," he said, shaking his head. "Don't want to know. It's just a feature of the landscape, I guess, a weird local phenomenon like a magnetic anomaly or a patch of strange fog. But what does it do?" "Nothing," he said, leaning forward and fixing me with a serious paternal gaze. "It does absolutely nothing. As long as you do nothing too. That's the one and only rule, son. You see him in the corner of your eye? You keep looking straight ahead. You feel him watching you? You pretend you don't. You do not acknowledge him. You do not engage with him. And you sure as hell don't go looking for him. He's a thing you're only supposed to see by accident. You start making it on purpose, and that's when you get into trouble." "Trouble?" I asked. "What kind of trouble?" "We don't know," the younger ranger chimed in, her voice tense. "No one's ever been stupid enough to find out. It's just common knowledge, a professional courtesy among those of us who work out here. You leave him alone and he leaves you alone." I left the ranger station with my mind reeling. Their warning was stark and absolute, but they had also given me something else, a validation and a name, the Upside Down Man and the smudge in my photos. It was a vertical shape of light, a shape like a man hanging. It was him. My camera could see him even when I couldn't. And that's where I made my mistake, my fatal, arrogant mistake. I'm a photographer. My entire life, my entire purpose is to see things and to capture them. To be told that there was something out there, a real, observable phenomenon that I was supposed to ignore. It was anathema to me. It was an irresistible challenge. And the ranger's warning was just a dare. I went back into the woods, but this time I was hunting for him. My entire methodology changed. I'd find a spot and wait, not for an animal to appear, but for that familiar prickling sensation on my skin. The moment I felt it, I wouldn't move my head. I'd keep my eyes locked forward, but I'd raise my camera, aiming the lens not at what I was looking at, but at the periphery, at the space where I felt he was, and I'd shoot. The first photos were chilling. The vertical smudge just grew. It was a brilliant, searing slash of overexposed white light, sharp and defined. It looked like a wound in the fabric of the photograph, a tear through which a sterile, featureless light was pouring. And with every photo I took, the slash grew wider, brighter, more aggressive. It was like I was annoying it, and it was screaming back at me through my own camera. I became possessed by it. I stopped eating properly. I barely slept. I was fueled by a manic, obsessive energy. I filled memory card after memory card with these impossible images. The creature was always there, just at the edge of my sight, a shimmering, wavering promise. And I kept shooting, trying to get a clearer image, trying to resolve that blinding white light into a discernible form. Then my camera died. I was in a deep, mossy canyon. The feeling of being watched was a palpable, heavy pressure on my right side. I raised my camera, aimed it into the periphery, and pressed the shutter. The resulting image on the small LCD screen was pure, blinding white. A completely blank frame. I tried again. White. I aimed it at my own feet. White. He had broken it, or more accurately, he had filled it. My camera could now only see the blinding, featureless light of his presence. It was useless. Any sane person would have stopped then. They would have taken the ranger's warning to heart and gotten the hell out of there. But I wasn't sane anymore. My obsession had burned through my reason. The loss of my camera just felt like a challenge, And now, I would have to use my own eyes. I continued the hunt. I would walk through the woods until I felt the familiar presence. Then I would stop and I would try to see him. I'd keep my head pointed forward, but I'd strain my eyes to the side, trying to resolve the shimmering, wavering shape in my peripheral vision. I'd try to hold it, to focus on it, to force it into clarity. And that's when the smudge moved from my photos to my own vision. It started as a small, barely noticeable floater in the corner of my right eye, a tiny, translucent blur. I assumed it was an eye strain, but it didn't go away. And every time I went on one of my hunts, every time I tried to force my eyes to see the creature directly, the smudge would get a little bigger, a little more opaque. It was turning from a translucent blur into a patch of milky white fog. I was in the woods trying to focus on the shimmering shape hanging from a distant branch. And as I strained, I saw the white fog in my own eye physically expand, spreading like a drop of milk in water. And I finally understood. With a clarity so profound and so terrifying it felt like a physical blow, I understood what was happening. It was that he couldn't be seen directly. His very nature was to exist at the edge of perception. And by trying to force him into the center, by trying to capture him, first with my camera and then with my own eyes, I was violating the fundamental rule of his existence. And he was fighting back. He was erasing the part of my vision that I was using to see him. He was a blind spot, a living predatory blind spot. And he was growing, feeding on my sight. The panic that hit me was unlike anything I have ever known. It was the terror of a man realizing the weapon he has been firing is powered by his own blood. I was deep in a remote wilderness and I was going blind. I ran. It was a clumsy, stumbling, panicked flight. I tripped over roots I couldn't see properly, crashed through branches that seemed to come out of nowhere. The white fog in the corner of my eye seemed to pulse and swirl with every frantic beat of my heart. I finally made it back to my truck, my body bruised and scratched, my mind a screaming wreck. I drove out of that forest and I have not been back. That was a month ago. The white patch in my vision hasn't gone away. I've seen 3 different ophthalmologists and a neurologist. They've run every test imaginable. My eyes, they tell me, are perfectly healthy. There is absolutely nothing physically wrong with them. They think I'm having a complex psychological episode brought on by stress and solitude. I knew it wouldn't be that easy. I thought the connection was through the photos. I thought they were the anchor. So last week, I built a bonfire in my backyard. I took every memory card, every hard drive, every single print I had made of the white slashes, and I burned them. I watched until they were nothing but a pile of melted plastic and gray ash. I felt a sense of relief, exorcism, if I may say. It didn't work. He's not just in the forest anymore. He followed me home. He's here with me now as I type this. Not in the room, not in the house. He's in the corner of my eye. I'll be sitting here on my couch and I'll get that old familiar prickling sensation. And I'll know. If I let my focus soften, I can see him. A tall, wavering, upside-down shape shimmering at the very edge of my vision. Sometimes he's in the corner of the room. Sometimes when I'm outside, he's hanging from a telephone pole. He's always there, a silent, constant companion. The Rangers were right. The only rule is to ignore him. And now, that is my life. I live in a state of constant vigilant denial. I can never turn my head too quickly. I can never let my eyes wander. I have to consciously, actively not see the thing that is always there. because I know that if I try to look at him, if I give in to that primal urge to face the thing that is watching me, the white fog in my eye will grow, and there's not much of my vision left to lose. So this is my warning. If you ever find yourself in the deep, quiet places of the world and you feel a prickling at the back of your neck and you see something impossible just at the edge of your sight, for the love of God, pretend you didn't. Look away. Keep looking straight ahead. Some things aren't meant to be seen, and they will take everything from you to make sure you can't. Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into Story 3. I found a second phone that's exactly like mine. Then it started showing me murders. The phone was in the glove compartment of my car. I hadn't opened it in ages. I never kept anything important in there. But now that I was finally cleaning out my ride, I found it. It looked exactly like mine. Not just the same model, the screen crack was in the same place as on mine. The case matched perfectly, and even that damn fingerprint sensor was just as unreliable. This phone was identical to mine, except mine was in my pocket. So whose phone was this? I unlocked it. Same passcode as mine, same apps. Even the social media accounts were logged in as me. Only one thing was different. A new app on the home screen labeled, "For Oliver." That message was clearly meant for me, and I don't know why, but it made the whole thing feel even creepier. What was even stranger, when I opened the app, it didn't show anything except a countdown timer. 34 hours, 11 minutes, and 55 seconds. It kept ticking down, but what the hell was it counting toward? I didn't know what to make of it. I just tossed it back into the glove compartment. I didn't have time for this. I had a date tomorrow finally. After so long, I had to get ready. The date went well. We had dinner at a restaurant, then took a walk. And since I figured it was the polite thing to do, I offered to drive her home. But the moment we got into the car, I heard a strange sound, like someone crying softly in the background. The girl looked at me and said she thought it was coming from the glove compartment. I could see on her face that she thought something was off. I opened the glove box quickly. The phone was there, the copy. It was vibrating, and the app labeled "For Oliver" was lighting up. Its ringtone? A choked, agonizing sound like a woman sobbing in pain. Before I could say a word, she jumped out of the car and hurried off. Perfect. Now, thanks to this goddamn phone, I probably looked like some lunatic. I figured it was best not to chase after her. First date, after all. Didn't want her calling the cops on me for harassment or whatever. The phone wouldn't stop. The crying looped again and again until I finally unlocked it. As soon as I did, the app launched on its own, the one addressed to me, and finally it went silent. The app looked like a photo gallery, but each album was locked with a timer, every single one counting down except the first. That one simply said "unlocked." I stared at the screen, confused. What the hell is this? Then, though I wish I hadn't, I opened the album. At first, there were just images of a building, then a door, then an empty room, then another door. And finally, the inside of that room, too. The last few photos froze me in place. A bound woman lay on the floor, mutilated. Her head was missing. Various objects were stabbed into her torso. The floor and walls were soaked in blood. Total massacre. Grotesque, surreal, like I'd stumbled into the middle of a horror movie. Without thinking, I jumped out of the car and hurled the phone as far as I could. I never wanted to see it again. I just went home. That was enough for one night. It was Saturday, so I slept in. Finally, some much-needed rest, though those images still haunted me. What kind of sick thing was this anyway? groggy and half asleep, I stumbled into the kitchen to make breakfast and coffee. But my heart skipped a beat the moment I saw the table. A phone was lying in the middle of the kitchen table. But it couldn't be mine. Mine was still in my hand. It was that copy again. Same appearance, same every little detail, and yes, that cursed app was still on it, full of folders. One album had already been unlocked. The next, still locked for another 13 hours, 14 minutes, and 48 seconds. I had zero interest in seeing whatever horror it was counting down to. I grabbed the phone, opened the window, and was this close to throwing it out from my 5th-floor apartment. Surely it wouldn't find its way back from there. But then, one thought made me stop. The phone was logged in everywhere, to all my accounts. Even my banking app was open. If someone found it and looked through it, I'd be screwed. I figured the safest move was to wipe everything. So I reset it to factory settings. Finally, everything was gone, or so I thought. The rest of my day passed quietly. I went grocery shopping, cooked, then played some video games. A typical Saturday routine. I was just putting away the leftovers when my heart nearly gave out. Someone was screaming, agonized, tortured wailing. I had no idea where the sound was coming from until I saw it again, that damn phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was flashing, buzzing, and the app had activated again. This time it was a man's screams coming through, and it wouldn't stop until I opened the gallery. Once again it started with a house. An old crumbling building, but not the same one as before. I didn't care. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't going to let this thing force me to witness another horror. I closed the gallery, set the phone down, and stood up. But it sprang back to life. Beeping, buzzing, shrieking, and the screaming grew even louder this time. Panicking, I snatched it up again. Same app. Was this for real? Did I actually have to look at the images or it wouldn't stop? I gave in. I looked. This time it was a man, naked, gutted. His face had been peeled off. All his fingers were missing. Chills crawled down my spine. Not just from what I was seeing, but from the terrifying thought that someone intended these photos specifically for me. At least the screaming stopped. I simply couldn't fall asleep. Those images haunted me. What the hell was this? What kind of sick nightmare was I in? By nightfall, I'd had enough. I grabbed the phone, smashed it to pieces with a hammer, and dropped it in a glass of water. It's not gonna screw with me anymore. But when I opened my eyes the next morning, there it was, lying on my nightstand, perfectly intact, right next to my real phone, same model, same look, exactly like mine. I didn't have much planned for Sunday. I just wanted to rest. I had just started my daily routine when I heard a voice. A man's voice again. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was desperate, pleading, suffering, wailing. It was that damn phone again, sitting on the little table beside my bed, screaming. I tried to turn down the volume, but nothing worked. The only thing I could do was open the app. Another album had unlocked. The new image set started with a building, and I recognized it. That place was near my workplace. A burned-out, abandoned apartment block no one had touched in years. I scrolled further, and there he was, a man tied to a chair. His tongue had been cut out, his eyes gouged. A screwdriver was jammed down his throat. It was a horrific sight. But what really shocked me, that man was my boss. Sunday afternoon, I had to calm down. I was completely panicked. I dropped by Robert's place. He's an old friend. I needed to talk to someone about the phone and the pictures, but when I tried to show him, the app wouldn't open. We tried everything. He looked at it by himself. I unlocked it and handed it to him. We looked together. I even tried showing it to him through a mirror. But the moment Robert could see the screen, the app just didn't work. I didn't dare throw the phone away. It had just come back, or worse, it had opened for someone else and I'd get blamed for all of it. I even tried calling my boss. He didn't pick up. I don't think I've ever felt this kind of gut-wrenching anxiety in my life. Robert works night shifts as a sysadmin, so he had to leave for work. I drove home alone. Nothing weird happened on the way back. I reached the elevator at the same time as my downstairs neighbor, a kind, middle-aged woman and her dog. They were just coming back from an evening walk. We chatted a bit in the elevator, and then a woman's voice echoed out, wet, choking, guttural, like someone trying to scream while drowning. It was loud. The phone in my pocket buzzed and flashed. The woman didn't say anything else, just got off on her floor. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. I was so embarrassed. When I got home, I quickly scrolled through the pictures, didn't even want to look, just another victim, a tortured woman. Before going to bed, I scrolled a bit on my real phone. As for the copy, I threw it in the toilet and flushed it. I'd had enough. Lying in bed, I kept reading the news, and that's when I saw the article. A brutal murder happened right here in the city. The building looked familiar. It was the first photo from the phone, the first murder scene. The next day was Monday. Work was hell. Bob, my boss, didn't show up. No one knew where he was. And me? I felt like death. Nausea, dizziness, cold sweats, and the crushing feeling that everyone around me somehow knew what I knew, that I'd seen what happened to Bob. I kept thinking about going to the police, handing in the phone. But what then? They'd blame me for everything. They'd think I was crazy, especially if I couldn't even show them the pictures. That afternoon, I went home, said I was sick. I just couldn't stay at the office. But one thought kept echoing in my head. I'll go to the next location. I'll see what's there. That same afternoon, I bought pepper spray and a stun gun. I had to be ready. I needed to find some kind of clue, figure out who's behind this or what the hell this phone even is. The app said the next album would unlock later that evening. 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 22 seconds left. I was already on my way. The photos showed a factory building. I didn't recognize it, but Google's reverse image search helped. It was an abandoned industrial site on the edge of town. I was speeding toward it like a man on a mission. I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this destroy me, and I had a plan. When I arrived, I saw it immediately, a light on in one of the upstairs offices of the factory. Someone was in there. That was the sign. I pulled out my phone and called the police. Told them a murder was happening. If anything happened to me, at least they'd know where to look. Getting inside was easy. One of the chain doors had already been busted open. In the courtyard, a gray van was parked. This was it. The killer was here. This could finally be over. My hands were slick with sweat, but I counted on the element of surprise. I couldn't take seeing another corpse on that cursed phone. I stood outside the door. Light leaked from underneath it. Strange sounds drifted out, a mix of gurgling, groaning, and whispering. I readied the stun gun and kicked the door open. The room looked empty, but in the far corner something was hidden beneath a large tarp. A standing lamp cast harsh light across it. I ran over and yanked the tarp down. The sight paralyzed me. 2 women lay on the floor, tied together. Their bodies were mutilated, their insides torn out. They'd been gutted like animals. And next to them, a man crouched low, eating the organs straight off the ground. raw. I couldn't move. My mind went blank. The man looked up slowly, and I saw my own face staring back at me. Bloodied, twisted, but it was me. I was the one crouching there. I was the one eating them, me. I couldn't move. He stood up, kept staring at me. And then he smiled, a grotesque, smug grin, so proud, so cruel. "It'll be a lot easier like this," he said, blood dripping from his mouth. Then he turned and bolted through the back door, fast as a cheetah, gone. And I just stood there, frozen in place, my feet glued to the floor. Through the window, the red and blue flash of police lights began to flicker in. They had arrived, but my double was already gone. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to Story 4. My upstairs neighbor is copying my every move. I moved into a new apartment a few weeks ago. The rent was manageable and the place itself was pretty nice. When I first talked to the landlord, I asked him about the other tenants. He told me that the only one of note was the woman who lived in the apartment above mine. He described her as a hermit. Apparently, no one had actually seen her in years, and her rent was being paid through an inheritance. I jokingly asked if she was actually alive or not. The landlord got a kick out of that, but he assured me that she was. At the time, I didn't really think much of it. In fact, a quiet upstairs neighbor sounded pretty nice. Unfortunately, I didn't know what I was in for. The day after I moved in, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when I heard some footsteps above me. All the apartments in my building have the same floor plan. What this means is that my apartment layout is exactly the same as hers. My kitchen is directly below her kitchen. The same goes for the bathroom, bedroom, hallway, etc. A few seconds after I left the kitchen, when I was about halfway down the hall, I heard her footsteps again. When I went into my room and grabbed my phone off the bed, she stopped right above me. What's the big deal, right? She was just walking to her bedroom at the same time I was. Well, here's the thing. When I walked out of my bedroom and headed back towards the kitchen, so did she. I could distinctly hear her lumbering steps as I made my way down the hall and into the kitchen. I stopped in front of the stove, and a few seconds later, so did she. Speaking of her footsteps, they sounded wrong. They were heavy and a bit labored, as if the simple act of walking was difficult. As the ground beef sizzled in the pan, I decided to test something out. I quickly walked out of my kitchen and into the living room, stopping in front of my couch. After a couple seconds, she walked out of her kitchen, followed my exact path, and stopped directly above me. I left my living room and walked over to my front door. Sure enough, so did she. I walked the entire length of my apartment a few times, stopping at one end to let her catch up and then walking back down to the other. Somehow, she always knew exactly where I was. And for some reason, she was obsessed with being in the same spot. "How are you doing that?" I whispered to myself, staring up at the ceiling in disbelief. Before I could test her further, the smell of smoke began to fill my apartment as my dinner burned on the stove. As I raced back into the kitchen, she tailed closely behind. It continued on like that for a few days. All day, every day. Anytime I was in my apartment, she would follow me from room to room. I racked my brain trying to figure out how she knew exactly where I was at all times. I even pressed my ear to my floor to see if I could hear the people below me, but the floors were thick enough that I couldn't pinpoint their exact position. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. to go get a glass of water. As I was holding a cup under the faucet listening to the flowing water, do you know what I heard? I heard her fucking floorboards creak as she left her room, went down the hall, and stopped above me. At first, I tried to ignore it, I really did. But trust me, that is easier than it sounds. The person living above me was obsessed with following me, and that's kind of a difficult thing to ignore. It started affecting my sleep schedule. I just couldn't fall asleep knowing that she was above me, listening to my every movement. Multiple times a night I would get out of bed and go to the other side of my room just to see if she would follow. She always did. No matter how late at night it was, no matter how long it had been since I last moved, she always knew. It started to get so bad that I actively avoided going home. I would stay at work late, go out drinking, and some nights I would just drive around aimlessly. You want to know another weird thing? I never heard anything else from her apartment. No running water, no fridge opening, no furniture being moved. The only sound that she ever made was when she would follow me. One day, when I had a friend over for dinner, I told him what was going on. At first, he didn't believe me. He thought I was just being paranoid, so I decided to show him. I stood up from the table and walked to the other end of the living room. Without fail, my neighbor followed along. I moved around a bit more, and every time she tailed along. "How's she doing that?" my friend asked. "Like, how does she know where you are?" "She must just have really good hearing or something," I sighed. "Wait, I have an idea," he said, walking over to where I was standing. We both stood there in complete silence before my friend walked down the hall. My neighbor didn't move. He came back to my position and silently gestured for me to move. I headed down the hall and my neighbor followed. When I walked back into the living room, my friend was pale as a ghost. "Dude," he said, "she isn't following the sound of footsteps. She's following you." We tested this out 4 more times. Without saying anything, we would both walk in opposite directions. Every single time, my neighbor chose me. She didn't follow him a single time. It was always me. My friend offered to let me stay the night, but I declined. I was sick of being scared to live in my own home. Later that evening, after my friend had left, I was doing the dishes. When I put the last plate away and stepped into the living room, I heard her creaking floorboards above me. "Damn it, that does it," I muttered to myself. I stormed down the hallway, grabbed a broom from my closet, and stood there. Once I heard my neighbor reach my position, I struck the ceiling with the end of the handle 3 times. Then she responded. Loud stomps reverberated through the ceiling. I was so startled I nearly dropped the broom. It was as if she was hurling her entire body against the floor, again and again. Each slam came faster, harder, like she was trying to break through the ceiling and punish me. "Jesus fucking Christ!" I yelled. "Stop, for God's sake, just stop!" To my surprise, she actually did. The loud thuds came to an abrupt end, leaving me in silence. I collapsed against my wall and sank down to my knees, trying to calm my racing pulse. Later that evening, I was tossing and turning in bed as usual. I desperately wanted to step outside and smoke a cigarette, but I knew that if I got up, I would have to listen to her follow me. After debating it in my head for nearly 20 minutes, my nicotine addiction won out over my fear. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, my phone, and stepped out into the hall, not even bothering to turn on the lights. As I made my way down the dark hallway, I noticed something, or rather the absence of something. There were no footsteps above me. I walked up and down the hall a few times, and there was still nothing. For a moment, I was overjoyed, but then I spotted something. Something that made my heart race. My front door was open, just a crack, but it was open. Hall light spilled through the tiny gap and partially illuminated my living room. As I approached it, I saw that the little chain lock had been snapped clean off. My breathing became unsteady as I approached the door, lightly testing every step. And that's when I heard something that made my stomach churn. A giggle. It was faint, but it was there, the unmistakable sound of a woman giggling. And it was coming from my bedroom. I slowly turned around and stood by the door, peering down the unlit hallway I had just come from. My breathing hitched when I saw it. Something slowly leaned out of my bedroom doorway. It was so dark that I couldn't make out any features. All I could see was the vague shape of a human head with long, stringy hair. I couldn't move. I just stood frozen, mouth open like an idiot. The figure giggled again, its voice echoing through the hall. Its weight shifted and the floorboards creaked beneath it as it stepped out of my bedroom. That's when my fight or flight response finally activated. I threw my front door the rest of the way open and sprinted out of my apartment. I raced down the stairs and burst outside. The warm summer night made me sweat as I ran towards my car. Crickets chirped faintly beneath the sound of my heavy breathing as I got inside and locked the doors. As I turned my keys in the ignition, I looked through the windshield and up at my bedroom window. Something was pushing the blinds aside, looking back at me. I don't think I've ever driven so fast in my life. I peeled out of the parking lot and sped down the road, constantly checking my rearview mirrors. Once I got far enough away, I pulled off to the side of the road and called the cops. I explained everything to them, and they were at my apartment not long after. They searched the place high and low, but they weren't able to find anyone. They said that someone definitely broke in, but aside from the destroyed lock, it didn't look like they had tampered with anything else. They knocked on my neighbor's door to try and ask her a few questions, but no one answered. Apparently, her behavior wasn't enough to convince the cops that she was the one who broke in. And since I didn't actually have any video evidence, they wrote my suspicion off as paranoia. I'm staying with my friend now while I look for a new place, preferably something on the top floor this time. I don't know what was going on with my neighbor. All I know is that it's not my problem anymore. And now, every time I drive through my old neighborhood, I make sure to stay far away from that apartment building. Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. My girlfriend's dog has ruined our relationship. Hey, can I ask you something? I took a deep breath and set the knife down. Can we do this later? I haven't eaten all day. My girlfriend Vanessa was glaring at me. Her foot tapped against the floor, and I could see she was trying her best not to lash out. As if he sensed the tension growing in the room, that damn dog of hers lumbered into the kitchen. Fine, she said. I just want to know why you couldn't feed Harry. I know you're busy, but come on, Eli. He was starving. I rubbed the bridge of my nose and looked away. All right, sorry, I got called into work and forgot. I tried to smile, but it came off as more of a spasm of my lips. I'll buy him a bone or something to make up for it. Vanessa grabbed Harry's leash. This isn't the first time, though. Little tears dripped down her face onto the floor. Harry whined and nuzzled his wide head against her shoulder. He means a lot to me. Taking care of him is taking care of me, okay? I clenched my jaw so tight it felt like my teeth might crack. You got it, I said. After I heard the door close, I waited a few minutes before finally allowing myself to relax. I finished cutting up my chicken patty, then threw the cubes onto a bed of white rice. I thought, did she really not make anything for dinner because I didn't feed Harry? I shook my head and walked into the living room. I tried to lose myself in a true crime documentary about some people that went missing at a carnival a few decades ago. But I kept looking at the pictures scattered across the room instead. Pictures of Vanessa and her deceased husband, Oscar. I knew it shouldn't bother me that she kept those pictures. We had only been together for 2 years after all, whereas she and Oscar had been high school sweethearts who married shortly after graduation and were together for nearly 12 years. It hurt, though. It was obvious she still loved him. The fucking dog was proof of that. Apparently he had been a gift to her from Oscar on his deathbed. A living testament to their love. I snorted and opened another can of beer. The so-called testament to their love dug holes in the backyard every other day, which I had to fix, shit on the floors, and chewed up my best pair of dress shoes. Believe it or not, that was not the worst of it. Number not by far. The dog behaved like a spiteful stepson. He would put himself between Vanessa and I at night, which she found hilarious. He would scratch and howl at the door whenever we shut it to make love. One time, he even jumped onto me, leaving muddy paw prints all over my dress shirt right before we were going to leave for Valentine's Day dinner. The ensuing argument, which resulted after I cuffed him across the head, left me crashing at my brother's house for a week and Vanessa and I nearly splitting. Thankfully, we didn't. She was a cool gal and I really did not want to go back to living in an apartment on the south side. I never thought I would live in a house as nice as this one, and some dog wasn't going to push me out that easily. I laughed at the ridiculousness of it all. I wasn't even second place in my girlfriend's life. I was third. I drifted off into an irritable state that was half sleep and half dim awareness. Faintly, as if from far away, I heard Vanessa scolding me. Closer, ever closer, I felt something thick and wet move back and forth between my fingers. I snapped awake, my heart pounding. I was alone and the TV was off. A nightmare. It was a nightmare. Vanessa was asleep in our bed with the dog laying next to her in my spot. He looked up at me and growled softly as I entered the room. "Make room, Harry," Vanessa grumbled. The dog took his sweet-ass time to lay down on his doggy bed at our feet. The next morning found Vanessa and I going out for some breakfast sandwiches at one of our favorite spots. After some begging and a promise to go shopping with her at Marshall's later, she agreed to leave her dog at home. We people watched and ate and talked about workplace drama. I'm a cook and she's a nurse, so we have a lot of material to discuss. Looking back, it was one of the better dates we have had in a long while. No planning went into it. It just happened that way. Funny how that works. Vanessa crumpled up the sandwich wrapper and sighed. Ugh, if only these things weren't 800 calories. I snorted. "You'll be fine." I patted my belly, which had acquired some extra padding within the last few months. "I should probably lay off the extra calories, though." She raised a pencil-thin eyebrow. "You could lay off the beers, you know, or at least come out with Harry and I on our runs." "Wouldn't want to get between you two," I said glumly. Vanessa pursed her lips. "Oops." She leaned forward, her hands folded beneath her chin. "It's been half a year since you moved in and you two still haven't grown on one another. What's going on?" I crossed my arms. "I don't know. I feel like he hates me because I am not..." She rolled her eyes. "Harry is a dog. Let me say it again. He is a dog. He doesn't hate you, but he can sense that you don't like him. That is why I am asking you what's going on." "Nessa, he ate my shoes." The ones that belonged to my dad somehow singled them out from all the others like he knew how special they were to me. He gets mad whenever I try to lay down in our bed. She waved her hand. Are you hearing yourself, Eli? You're taking the actions of a dog personal. I'm worried about you. Ever since you moved in, you started drinking more. You don't work out like you used to. I am sorry, but you are losing yourself. She reached for my hands, her tone earnest as she took them in her own. I don't know if it's the stress from living in a new space or something at work. Something in me snapped. I yanked my hands away from hers and stood up. It is your fucking dog, I shouted. I regretted it almost instantly. Vanessa leaned back, her eyes wide. The workers stopped what they were doing and looked our way. I slowly took my seat, and together we sat there for a bit, not knowing where to take things. An older man walked over and looked at us both. Ma'am, is everything all right? He asked. A terrible calm settled over her. She slowly picked up the car keys, then smiled at the old man. Yeah, I am okay. Thanks. I tried to talk to her on the way back home, but she was silent. The dog greeted her enthusiastically at the door and growled at me. I briefly entertained a fantasy of kicking him in the side, but let it pass just as quickly. She didn't speak to me much over the next couple of days. I didn't bother trying to sleep in our room. The living room was my new space. It wasn't half that bad. Had it not been for the reoccurring nightmares, it would have been perfect. Work kept us on different schedules for the rest of the week, and when Friday came along, Vanessa told me she had made last-minute plans to go on a weekend trip with some of her girlfriends. I tried to give her a hug bye, but she brushed me off. She told me we would talk once she was back, and to make sure I fed and walked her dog. I nodded. I watched as she got in the car. My heart sank when I noticed one of her male co-workers was driving. I grabbed the dog's bowl and went into the garage. I scooped up some kibble from the big yellow bag and mixed it together with some leftover beef stew I made. I hoped it would count as some sort of attempt at building a relationship with the dog. Maybe Vanessa was right. Harry probably sensed my anger towards him, towards Vanessa. He was only being protective of his owner. I gathered up beer cans from around the house and threw them in the bin outside, feeling pretty down on myself. I had let my jealousy get the best of me. Took it out on a poor dog. Now I was probably going to lose my girl because of it. When I got inside, I saw Harry finishing up the last of his meal. He had licked the bowl clean. How'd you like it? I asked. He looked up at me and cocked his head. I saw his tail start to wag. I can make you more if you like the taste of that. I shifted from side to side, feeling ashamed. I owe you more than a few meals, Harry barked. He nudged the bowl with his paw, then barked again. I laughed and held up my hands. All right. I'll make some beef stew for us both tonight, but I need to run to the store. Think you can hold down the fort while I'm gone? I went to the local supermarket and strategized how I was going to make things right with Vanessa while I gathered ingredients for dinner. I had some pretty good ideas while there, and when I pulled into the driveway of our home, I realized that it had been some time since I had felt this at ease. I whistled, bags of groceries in hand, while walking up to the door. I noticed Harry watching me through a window. He barked and started scratching at the glass. Hold on, I'm coming, I said. I stepped inside and nearly dropped the groceries. Oh, fuck. The hell, you stupid fucking... All 150 pounds of Harry crashed into me. I didn't even have time to yell. Together we landed on the coffee table. It collapsed, sending wood and glass all over the carpet. Harry licked me across the face and barked happily. I stared up at him in disbelief. He jumped off of me. I breathed in deep lungfuls of air, laying there until I was able to get back up again. Outside of some cuts on my arm from the glass, I seemed to be fine. "Harry, Harry!" I shouted. I couldn't find him anywhere in the house. I yanked at my hair and tried to calm myself. Then I took a picture of what he had done and sent it to Vanessa. In the foyer, laid out perfectly for me to see, was a blanket I had gifted Vanessa last Christmas. It had a collage of some of our happiest moments printed on it. Harry had ripped into it and left a nice pile of crap on top. When Vanessa called me, she was in disbelief. She asked if I was sure Harry did it. Did I lock all of the doors before leaving? Was someone playing a prank? I nearly hung up on her then and there. Did she think he was some kind of perfect being incapable of making a mistake? Then she asked if I was angry enough at her to do something like that, which in return I suggested she couldn't accept her dog was a dick because he was a gift from her dead husband. Well, that did it. She said we would be going to couples therapy, and if I didn't want to, I would need to pack my bags and be out of there before she came home. Feeling defeated, I agreed. Then she hung up. I made dinner for one and felt some satisfaction at Harry's cries for my food. I kept him outside that night and didn't bother refilling his bowl. Knowing that my relationship was probably done for, I leaned back in my chair, flipped Harry off, and turned on the TV. It was the best night of sleep I had in a while. I dreamt of Vanessa back when we first got together, back when she was full of passion for me and we would lay together for hours. She kissed me passionately, her long hair tickling my mouth, and for a moment it felt as if we were hanging together in space. The only two souls throughout all that cold dark. Cold. I woke up to the cold. The window was wide open. I blinked back my fatigue and saw the first traces of dawn in the sky. I looked out onto the yard and saw Harry lying motionless. At first I thought he was fine, but when his sides failed to rise, I knew something was wrong. "Oh shit," I hissed. I stumbled towards the back door and went outside. I knelt next to him, trying to ignore the wave of emotion that threatened to drown me. I ran my hands along his curly coat, feeling for a pulse or breath or any sign of life. "Harry. Come on, Harry. Don't do this, buddy." I felt his head and his side, opened his mouth to check if he swallowed something. My hand stopped at his belly. My stomach sank. Some bit of metal was lodged there. My eyes widened. Did he fall on something? Did someone stab him? "Fuck," I whispered. I went to grab my phone and started to call the vet while I tried to pull aside the curls to better see the metal stuck in his gut. My finger and thumb closed around the flat piece of metal. The veterinarian's assistant answered, but I couldn't have spoken even if my life depended on it. I was frozen, every part of me rigid with fear. Harry slowly turned his head and stared at me. "Pull the zipper, Elijah," he said quietly. A choke, a cry, some sort of twisted primal groan of terror forced itself out of me. I willed myself to move faster, but I couldn't. I crawled backwards on my hands and feet, not even able to stand. All the while, Harry watched me. Since then, I have been staying at my brother's. Vanessa has called me multiple times, but I have not answered and have not read her texts either. I am too afraid. All of my things are still at her house, and I know I can't avoid this forever. I am stuck between two outcomes of going back. Either finding out I have gone insane and hallucinated a talking thing wearing a dog suit, or I don't even want to write it out. If any of you have any suggestions, then please let me know. Take away my accountability.